All right. Shalom Israel, shalom, shalom. This is Brother Warrior, and this is my channel, Rise Up Israel. First and foremost, I would like to give all honor and glory unto the Most High God, Yahweh, Bahashem, Hamashiach, Umalak Yahushai. That is to give all honor and glory to the Heavenly Father, who the world may call Jehovah, Yahweh, or simply God, but his real name in the Paleo Hebrew is Yahweh, right? And in doing so, we do so in the name of his only begotten Son, who the world would call Jesus, Yeshua, Joshua, but his real name is Yahweh Shai in the ancient Paleo Hebrew, right? So as you can see by the title of the video and by the screen, this is a presentation on the ancient flood stories, right? If you're familiar with Noah and the global deluge that flooded the earth and killed the vast majority of mankind, one man was preserved, and that man went on to repopulate the rest of the earth. Yeah, that's not only found in the Bible, right? It's found in a plethora of other accounts, such as, the the Eridu Genesis, Epic of Gilgamesh, and many others, right? And you have many people that say, oh, this is a book for, this is that Bible was copying the Epic of Gilgamesh and so on and so forth, when really it wasn't. And we're going to get into that, right? And not only was it not copying, but there's other ones that even predate the Epic of Gilgamesh. But Lord willing, is edifying video through the Spirit. Let's keep going. All right. The Bible's account of the flood. I can turn this down. It's a lot. The Bible's account of the flood begins with God observing widespread corruption and violence in humanity. In response, he decides to destroy all life on earth, except for Noah, who found favor in the eyes of the Lord. God instructs Noah to build an ark and bring his family and pairs of every animal to preserve life. Right? When Noah completes the ark, God sends rain for 40 days and nights, causing a great flood that covers the entire earth, including the mountains. Every living thing outside the ark perishes, right? After 150 days, the flood waters begin to recede, and the ark comes to a rest on the mountains of Ararat, right? Noah eventually sends out a raven, then a dove, to check if the land is dry. After the earth fully dries, God instructs Noah and his family to leave the ark. They offer a sacrifice in gratitude, right? God then promises never to flood the earth again and establishes the rainbow as a sign of his covenant. All right, so that's what you hear about that. That is the biblical narrative of the flood. That's how it went down, right? According to the Bible, at least, right? Let's keep going and see what other, nations brought this up. Other flood accounts, right? Other flood accounts, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh and various Hindu myths, can lend a credibility to the biblical flood narrative by highlighting shared themes such as a divine judgment and the survival of a righteous figure, suggesting a collective cultural memory of a catastrophic event. Archaeological evidence, including sediment layers and marine fossils found at high elevations like mountains, high hills, the Grand Canyon, places like that, supports the idea of significant flooding that could align with the biblical account. Furthermore, the moral and theological lessons in these narratives reflect common values across cultures, reinforcing the significance of obedience and divine justice. The geographic and temporal context of these stories, often rooted in the ancient Near East, further indicate that they may have originated from real events. While these similarities do not confirm the biblical account in every detail, they suggest a broader historical phenomenon that influenced the storytelling of multiple ancient cultures. All right. The importance of mythology and oral history, because a lot of these nations, that's how they expressed these stories, through oral tradition and through mythology. You see what I'm saying? So you may look at it and be like, oh man, well, I'm not really all too sure that these things, were real, because look how inflated they are. That's how a lot mythology is written. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just the ancient nations established mythology in a way in which to make sure it was preserved and remembered. Let's keep going. What is oral history? Oral history is a method of conducting historical research through recorded interviews between a narrator with a person experience of historical with a personal experience of historical significant events and a well-informed interviewer, with the goal of adding to the historical record. Because it is as a primary source, an oral history is not intended to present a final, verified, or objective narrative of events, or a comprehensive history of a place, such as the UCSC campus. It is a spoken account, reflects personal opinion offered by the narrator, and as such it is subjective. Oral histories may be used together with other primary sources as well as a secondary source to gain understanding and insight into history. The importance of mythology. Myths are a part of every culture in the world and are used to explain natural phenomena, where a people come from and how their civilization developed, and why things happen as they do. At their most basic level, myths comfort by giving a sense of order and meaning to what can sometimes seem a chaotic world. Mythology, from the Greek mythos for story of the people and logos for the word or speech, so the spoken story of a people, is the study and interpretation of often sacred tales or fables of a culture known as myths, or the collection of such stories which deal with various aspects of human condition. Good and evil, the meaning of suffering, human origins, the origin of place names and animals, cultures, cultural values and traditions, the meaning of life and death, the afterlife, the celestial stories of the gods or a god. Myths express the belief and values about the subjects held by a certain culture. Myths tell the stories of ancestors and the origin of humans in the world. The gods, supernatural beings such as satyrs, nymphs, mermaids, and heroes with superhuman, usually God-given powers, as in the case of the Greek myth of Hercules or Perseus. Myths also describe origins of nuances of long-held customs, or explain natural events such as the sunrise and sunset, the cycle of the moon and the seasons, or thunder and lightning storms. Scholars Maria Leach and Jerome Fried define mythology along these lines. Okay. Continued. A myth is a story presented as having actually occurred in a previous age, explaining the cosmological and supernatural traditions of a people, their gods, heroes, cultural traits, religious beliefs, etc. The purpose of myth is to explain, and as Sir Geological said, myths explain matters in the science of a pre-scientific age. This is how they look at it. Myths explain matters in the science of a pre-scientific age, right? Thus, myths tell of the creation of man, of animals, of landmarks. They tell why a certain animal has its characteristics, why the bat is blind, or why flies only, is blind or flies only at night, why or how certain natural phenomena came to be, why the rainbow appears, or how the constellation Orion got into the sky, how and why rituals and ceremonies began and why they continue. Mythology has played an integral part in every civilization through the world. Throughout the world. Prehistoric cave paintings, etchings, and stones, tombs, and monuments all suggest that long before human beings set down their myths in words, they had already developed a belief structure corresponding to the definition of myth provided by Leach and Fried. According to the 20th century psychiatrist Carl Jung, Myth is a necessary aspect of the human psyche, which needs to find meaning and order in a world which often presents itself as chaotic and meaningless, Jung writes. According to psychiatrist Carl Jung, myth is necessary, Salakia. Myth is a necessary aspect of the human psyche which needs to find meaning and order in the world. Okay. Let's keep going. Let me see. Did I skip anything? All right. Continued. Ancient myths were more than stories. They captured real events, societal values, philosophical ideas in ways that resonate deeply with people. Through symbols and legendary figures, myths conveyed natural events like floods or celestial cycles, embodied societal values through heroes, commemorated historic events and foundational figures. Explored creation and existence, and helped preserve cultural identity. These narratives provided shared wisdom, encouraging moral behavior, unity, and resilience, while helping people navigate its challenges and mysteries. Example: the story of the Trojan War likely has historical roots, with archaeological evidence suggesting a real conflict around the 12th century BCE Troy, right? This is something that has been known as a myth. In Greek mythology, however, it is dramatized with God's interference, legendary heroes, and symbolic elements like the Trojan horse. Figures such as Achilles and Odysseus embody Greek ideals, and themes of fate and prophecy deepen the story's meaning, transforming a military conflict into a timeless myth about human nature, honor, and destiny. So something as simple as the Trojan War, which history will validate, was written as mythologized. You see what I'm saying? People looked at it and didn't think it was real, especially the accounts that it gives, right? But does it mean it didn't happen? No. Let's keep going. Well-known flood accounts, right? So we just went through the importance of mythology and oral history, and how although mythology may be associated with false or fake or pseudo, it actually doesn't mean that things didn't happen. And there's examples to show that although something was mythologized, it doesn't mean it never happened. Mythology usually is just there to represent or convey a certain principle. You see what I'm saying? Explain the situation, but put an emphasis on the principle of why things happen so people won't forget it. All right, so here are some well-known flood accounts. You have the Eridu Genesis. The Eridu Genesis recounts the story of Ziusudra, a wise man advised by the god Enki to build a boat to survive an impending flood sent by the other gods due to humanity's wickedness. Sound familiar? A man who is advised by a god to build a vessel that travels on water to help survive an impending flood that's sent to eradicate humanity for wickedness. Sounds extremely familiar, right? Ziusudra constructs a vessel and gathers pairs of living things, preserving life on Earth. After the flood proceeds, Ziusudra granted eternal life as a reward for his obedience, symbolizing the preservation of knowledge and the continuation of humanity. The date of the Eridu Genesis is believed to have been composed around 3rd millennium BC, right? So around 2100 BC, right? It is one of the oldest known Sumerian texts. Think about it. One of the earliest known Sumerian texts is a text that speaks about a global flood. Interesting. Let's keep going. The Mesopotamian flood story. Floods were a consistent concern for people living along the Tigris and Euphrates in Mesopotamia. One of the most famous Sumerian tablets contained a story about a great flood that destroyed Sumer that is virtually the same story as the Noah story in the Old Testament. It describes a man named Utnapishtim. Sorry for butchering this name, but Utnapishtim, who was warned by the water god Enki to build a boat to save himself, his family, animals, and artisans from a great flood. Very interesting, right? How you have the same way as what before. You have a god over here, same God, God Enki, helping a man, preserving a man that is in making having this man make a vessel to prevent from and his family from dying, right? It describes a man named Utnapishtim, roughly paraphrasing, or roughly pronouncing, who is warned by the water god Enki to build a boat to save himself, his family, animals, and artisans from a great flood. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim is warned by the god Ea, equivalent to Enki, to build a large boat to escape a catastrophic flood sent by the gods to eradicate mankind due to their noise and lack of reverence. Right? Sound familiar? Utnapishtim follows these instructions, takes his family of pairs of animals aboard, and survives the deluge. After the flood, he offers a sacrifice to the gods and is granted immortality, becoming a symbol of the struggle against mortality and the importance of human life. And the Epic of Gilgamesh was written in early second millennium BC, with most scholars dating its composition to around 2000 BC. The text exists in various versions, with the most complete version dating from the 7th century BC. Let's keep going. The Nineveh flood story, right? The Nineveh flood story features Atrahasis, who is also warned by the god Ea of a flood that will destroy humanity. He builds a boat, gathers living creatures, and survives the deluge. After the flood, the gods regret their decision to annihilate humanity and promise Atrahasis that they will never destroy humanity again, indicating a new relationship between the divine and humans. This account emphasizes themes of obedience, preservation of life, and divine mercy. The Nineveh flood story is found within the Atrahasis epic, which is believed to be composed in the 18th century BC, around 1700 BC. The tablets containing this story were discovered in a library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, dating from the 7th century BC. Comparative analysis of flood accounts. All right, let's compare them. Divine decision to flood the earth, right? Meaning a god had something to do with the flood happening. You have the Genesis. The gods decided to send a flood, and they were in council together. They swore an oath. You have the Epic of Gilgamesh. The gods in it, their hearts prompted them to make a deluge. The Nineveh flood story. The great gods convened and decided to bring a flood upon the earth. The biblical account. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Right? Now, the instructions to build a vessel. Genesis. Tear down the house, build a ship aboard ship, take thou the seed of all living things. All right, that's the Genesis. Now you have the Epic of Gilgamesh. Pull down thy house, build a ship, measure well its dimensions, make it to correspond its breadth and its length. The Nineveh flood story. The god said to the hero, build a great ship to preserve life. And the biblical account. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. Next, gathering of animals. Genesis. Aboard ship, take thou the seed of all living things. The Epic of Gilgamesh. Embark seed of life and all kinds on a ship. Nineveh flood story. Gather the animals of the earth and take them into the ship. And the biblical account. And every living thing of all flesh ye shall bring 2 of each sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. Right? These are 4 separate flood accounts. Just 4, and there's more. But these are 4 major flood accounts. You have the Great Flood, the Genesis, all the evil winds and all stormy winds gathered into one, the flood was sweeping over the cities. Epic of Gilgamesh. When the sender of rain shall rain upon you, a mighty rainstorm, the floods be poured down. Nineveh flood story. The flood began and the heavens opened. Torrents of rain fell upon the earth. The rain fell upon the earth in 40 days and 40 nights. Right? And as you hear these things, understand that these are 4 separate accounts of the same event happening. Just imagine if when 9/11 happened, you had 4 separate accounts from 4 separate nations of people talking about the same thing, this one event that happened. It would further prove that the event actually happened, right? But let's keep going. The duration of the flood. The Genesis. After the flood had swept over the country, the sun came out spreading light. Epic of Gilgamesh. 6 days and 7 nights blew the wind, and the deluge overpowered. Nineveh flood story. The flood continued for 7 days and nights, drowning all that breathed. Then the biblical account. And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. Right? Release of birds to find land. The Genesis. Ziasidra then drilled an opening on the big boat. The gallant Utu sent his light into the interior of the big boat. Right? Epic of Gilgamesh. I brought out a dove. The dove went out and returned. There was no resting place and she came back. Right? The Nineveh flood story. I released a bird which flew but returned quickly, unable to find land. Okay? And then the biblical account. Give me a second. He sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters had subsided from the face of the ground, but the dove found no place to set her foot. Number 7. The end of the flood and sacrifice. Genesis. I appointed a sacrifice on top of the mountain peak. The Epic of Gilgamesh. I offered a sacrifice on the mountain after the flood abated. Right? You see them offering sacrifices. Right? Nineveh. He sacrificed on the peak of the mountain as a gift to the gods. Right? And now the biblical account. Noah built an altar to the Lord and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. All right? Let's keep going. The purpose of the flood. In the Genesis, the flood is sent to cleanse humanity. Is sent to cleanse the earth of humanity's sins. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the flood serves to punish humanity for their noise and lack of reverence to the gods. The Nineveh flood story, the flood is depicted as a means of purging the earth of wickedness. And you have the biblical account. The Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals, creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. Keep going. Continued, right? The hero's name and role. The Genesis, the hero Ziasidra is portrayed as a wise figure who follows divine instructions. Right? Now you have the Epic of Gilgamesh. The hero, Utnapishtim, is similarly depicted as a wise man chosen to survive the flood. These are like other nations' account on one event. Let's keep going. The Nineveh flood story. The hero is often referred to as Atrahasis, a figure known for his piety and obedience to the gods. Right? And the biblical account, Noah is portrayed as a righteous man who finds favor with God, chosen to preserve life. Right? Again, multiple accounts of the same thing. And why is this important? Because according to the biblical narrative, all these nations come from people that were actually went through the flood. They would be like all these Sumerian, Nineveh, and Babylon, and obviously the Israelites. These are nations that, of course, all nations, but these are nations who come from the people who actually witnessed the event. You see what I'm saying? So let's keep going. The aftermath of the flood. The Genesis. Zeasidra emerges from the flood to a renewed world and receives blessings from the gods. Epic of Gilgamesh. Utnapishtim serves survival leads to a discussion about mortality and the renewal of life on earth. The Nineveh flood story. After the flood, life is replenished and the hero is rewarded for his actions. The biblical account. After the flood, Noah is commanded to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The Greek flood myth. This is when you start hearing about the Greeks. All right, let's keep going. The Greek flood myth. Again, pardon my mispronunciation. Deucalion in Greek legend, the Greek equivalent of Noah, the son of Prometheus, the creator of humankind, king of Phthia, the Thessaly, a husband of Pyrrha. He was also the father of Helen, the mythical ancestor of the Hellenic race. When Zeus, the king of the gods, resolved to destroy all humanity by a flood, Deucalion constructed an ark in which, according to one version, he and his wife rode out the flood and landed on Mount Parnassus, according to a story found first in the Roman poet Ovid's Metamorphoses, Book 1. Upon offering a sacrifice and inquiring how to renew the human race, they were ordered to cast behind them the bones of their mother. The couple correctly interpreted this to mean they should throw behind them the stones of the hillside Mother's Earth, and they did so. These stones thrown by Deucalion became men, while these thrown by Pyrrha became women. In early Greek versions, Hermes told the couple directly to cast stones behind them. All right, Deucalion and Pyrrha. The story of Deucalion and Pyrrha resembles a lot to the biblical story of Noah. This is the version of ancient Greeks in their attempt to purify the old world from its sins and give birth to a new race of human. The amazing thing is the similarities between the two stories, as both of them use a disastrous flood as a means to make the humankind extinct. The few people that are saved from the flood have managed to do so in a boat, and many days after the rain has stopped, did they manage to step on land. The purest people on earth. While the Titan Prometheus was bound and chained atop Mount Caucasus for stealing fire from Zeus, the world below and his peoples were in a bad moral situation. Greed, anger, jealousy, and hate would exist among people ever since Pandora had opened that forbidden box from where all evils went out. The gods were angry at the humans because, apart from their acceptable behavior, they would also forget to pray to their names and honor them with sacrifices. This is why Zeus decided to destroy all humankind. Only two people would seem right. Deucalion, who was the son of Prometheus, known for his rightful character and good advice, and his wife Pyrrha, a very fair lady. The gods had received them to be the most righteous among the men and women on earth, and had chosen them to be the only ancestors of the catastrophe that was about to befall on every man and animal. Right? One day, while visiting his father Prometheus, Deucalion was told by his father that a great flood was about to devastate and wash away everything on earth, for people had forgotten the purpose of their creation. Alarmed at the dire warning, Deucalion hastened back to Pyrrha, telling her of the impending doom. They constructed a boat together and were making themselves ready for the disaster. Again, these are what the early nations say about their flood story. It's insanely similar. Let's keep going. A strange, uncomfortable silence descended upon the surroundings. There was not a breath of wind to be felt. Without warning, The storm unleashed its fury upon the poor people, lashing them severely. Deucalion and Pyrrha got quickly into the boat, and soon the flood carried them away. The rain was raging for days and nights, and all fell to the wrath of the gods. Only the Deucalion and Pyrrha aboard the boat were kept safe. The fury of the storm stopped only when all around was only water. Not a tree or mountain could be seen. Sounds familiar? Again, this is the fifth account, but blood story. I said blood flood story that we see, and it's insanely similar, right? The boat was drifting for days while the water slowly drained away, and finally, the day came when it rested on dry land atop Mount Parnassus, close to the area of Delphi. Dismay struck the hearts of Deucalion and Pyrrha as their eyes fell on the destruction and devastation caused by the flood. Such was their grief that tears were rolling from their eyes with no stop. Then Hermes, the messenger of the gods, unable to bear their sadness, appeared before them and told them to wipe their tears from their eyes, and without looking back, to throw the bones of their mother over their shoulders. At first the two were puzzled at this cryptic message, but Deucalion found the solution. The mother was the earth, and the bones were the stones. Deucalion and Pyrrha gathered all the stones together, and while they were walking, they threw the stones behind them without looking. As from a miracle, the stones hit the earth and were turned into humans. These thrown by Deucalion became handsome men, and those thrown by Pyrrha became fair women. It was thus that two survivals of the great flood repopulated the earth, and once again they emerged a human race. Deucalion reigned over them as a wise king, and Pyrrha was their queen. The Yoruba flood story. So not only do we have proof that the Greeks is a flood story, but that the Yorubas also have a flood story. Let's go. All right. A lot of these are going to be a lot quicker than the ones you read previously. The Yoruba flood myth, right? The flood account is from the Yoruba mythology of West Africa, especially tied to Orishas deities Olokun, Abatala, Eshu, and Olorun. In this myth, Olokun, the goddess of the sea, becomes angered by Obatala's action and sends a flood, but Olorun, the supreme deity, ultimately stops the waters after receiving sacrifices and messages from the survivors. The story from the Yoruba culture serves as an explanation for floods and the origins of civilizations and knowledge, right? So Olokun did not like what Abtala had done with her ocean, and how he went ahead and did it without permission. She sent huge waves to create floods, drowning people and their animals. Some of the surviving people ran up into the high part of the land. They sacrificed a goat to Eshu for him to deliver a message to Olorun, and a goat to Olorun to stop the flooding waters. Olorun received the goat and message, so he stopped the flood. The waves settled back in the sea, and the skies cleared. People moved back to the lowlands. Abtala wanted to teach humans more. He taught them how to tell when floods were coming. In the rainy season also, he taught them how to read and write. This is how the first civilization came to be. The end. And that's the story of the Yoruba flood myth. And here's what it says. It may not be verbatim exactly how we see it, but we see a flood. We see man survival. We see a sacrifice made at the end of the flood. And then we see that this is the first civilization that came to be. This is how the first civilization came to be, right? Through a flood, right? Let's keep going. The Hawaiian flood myth. Okay. We have Hawaiian flood myth. In ancient Hawaii, there was a man named Nu, sometimes known as Nu Pule, which means Nu the prayerful, or praying Nunu. The gods, displeased with humanity, decided to send a flood to cleanse the world. Sound familiar? Nu was a righteous man, faithful to the gods, and was warned in advance of the coming flood. The survival of Nuhu built a large vessel known as Wa'a, canoe, a canoe or ark, with a house on top. He gathered his family and a selection of animals to bring with him onto this vessel. As the flood waters rose, Nuhu and his family took refuge in the ark and were saved as the waters covered the earth. The waters eventually began to recede. Nuhu's ark came to rest on top of Mauna Kea, one of the tallest mountains in Hawaii. Again, this is a flood story. According to some versions of the tale, Nuhu mistook the moon for the god Cain and tried to offer him a sacrifice in gratitude for their deliverance. Again, another sacrifice being made at the end of the flood. The god Cain then descended from the heavens to correct Nuhu and acknowledge his piety. The gods blessed Nuhu and his family, allowing them to begin repopulating the land. Repopulation at the end of it. Nuhu became known as the progenitor of a new generation of humanity in Hawaiian tradition, honoring the gods and preserving the memory of the great flood that reshaped the earth. Again, you have even in Hawaiian mythology, you have a mighty figure, a figure with piety, with discipline, a righteous leader or a righteous figure that is able to avoid being destroyed through a flood, as many other myths state. Let's keep going. You have the Aztec creation story. Keep going. Okay, so I'm probably not going to pronounce this right, but Mictlantecuhtli, Lord of the land of the dead, tried to stop the creation of man. So Mict, I'm just going to say Mict, was a god in the Aztec pantheon. Translated literally, his name means Lord of Mictlan. Mictlan being the Aztec underworld or land of the dead. The Aztecs believed that there were a number of paradises and entry into them depending on the manner of one's death. Those who failed to gain entry into these paradises, however, would end up in Mictlan, the domain of Mictlantecuhtli. Mictlantecuhtli's power. So Mict's power was as a god is evident in the Aztec creation myth. The Aztecs believed in cycle of suns, the current one being the fifth cycle. Each cycle ended in destruction, and human beings had to be created anew each time. At the end of the fourth cycle, a great flood drowned the people of the earth, and human beings had to be created once more to populate the earth. Again, a flood destroying humanity, and humanity having to repopulate the earth again. In order to do so, the god Quetzalcoatl traveled to Mictlan to retrieve bones of human beings from the previous cycles. All right, this is Tata and Nina. In contrast to the Hawaiians, the Aztecs did have a flood myth that was clearly indigenous and preceded the arrival of Europeans. Note the similarities with the American Indian myths given later. During the era of the fourth sun, the son of Walter, the people grew very wicked and ignored the worship of the gods. The gods became angry with Tlaloc, the god of the rains, announced that he was going to destroy the world with a flood. However, Tlaloc was fond of a devout couple, Tata and Nina, and he warned them of the flood. He instructed them to hollow out a great log and take 2 ears of corn, one for each of them, and eat nothing more. So Tata and Nina entered into the tree trunk with the 2 ears of corn, and it began to rain. When the rains subsided and Tata and Nina's log landed on dry land, they were so happy that they had caught a fish and ate it. Contrary to the orders of Tlaloc, it was only after the stomachs were full that they remembered Tlaloc command. Tlaloc then appeared to them and said, "This is how I am repaid for saving your lives." They were changed into dogs. It was at this point where even the most righteous people were disobedient, and the gods destroyed the world ushering in the present era of the fifth sun. Okay, that was, again, still global flood, just a little different. Let's keep going. Give me a second. Additional information, right? Now we have the Sumerian Kings List, right? This is information that isn't directed into mythology, partially mythologized, but it's not directly called mythology, right? The Sumerian King List, an ancient record of kingship, right? The Sumerian King List is an ancient Mesopotamian text that records a succession of kings combining myth, history, and political propaganda. It was written in Sumerian cuneiform and dates back to 2100 BC, with the most complete version found on the Weld Blundell Prism. The list claims the kingship was divinely granted and passed from one city to another over time. Early kings are described with extremely long reigns. So, example, Al-Hilam ruled for 28,000 years. Do I believe that? No. But I do. There is some credence that before an event, kings would reign for long. I mean, the people would live longer, right? Which suggests a mix of legend and historical record, the Great Flood, and the biblical connection. The Sumerian King List mentions a Great Flood, marking a clear divide between pre-flood and post-flood rulers, right? So it's making a clear divide between the a flood, a pre-flood, and a post-flood rulers. The people before the flood lived longer than the people that lived after the flood, right? Then the flood swept over the land. After the flood had passed, kingship was reestablished in Kish. The flood narrative parallels in the biblical account of Noah's flood, as well as Mesopotamian stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh, Atrahasis' epic. After the flood, the reign lengths become shorter and more historically realistic, indicating a shift from mythological to a more factual record keeping. Again, that's how they look at it, right? Some scholars believe that these ancient accounts may reflect real catastrophic flood events in early human history. Additional information. The Sumerian King List. Let's keep going. Again, Mesopotamia, 2100 BC. The Sumerian King List is an ancient text that records the reigns of kings before and after a great flood. It describes extremely long lifespans before the flood. Some rulers are said to have reigned for thousands of years. A catastrophic flood that wiped out many kings. The flood acts as a major dividing point in history, right? It's the pre and post deluge, right? Shorter lifespans after the flood. The kings after the flood ruled for much shorter periods, which could indicate a shift in political or environmental conditions. This text aligns with Mesopotamian flood myths like the Epic of Gilgamesh, Atrahasis, reinforcing the idea that a significant flood event affected early Mesopotamian civilizations. Let's keep going. Post-flood accounts, right? Let's keep going. The Tower of Babel, a ziggurat. Biblical references. This is referencing to the Tower of Babel, ran by which was written. You see in Genesis 11, right? The Tower of Babel is described as a massive structure built by humanity to reach the heavens. Some scholars believe the Tower of Babel was a ziggurat. That's what I believe. A type of stepped temple found in ancient Mesopotamia. Ziggurats were built to honor gods and served as centers of worship and political power, right? So you have the ziggurat, you had the steps, and then you had the top of it was a temple. This is of a higher status than every other temple you would see. The regular temples you would see, according to what people would think, according to every temple you would see, they would be closer to the ground and you still make the sacrifices. But having a sacrifice that's an exalted temple, many believe that would be to get closer to the gods, right? Key similarities to ziggurats. Built with sun-dried bricks and bitumen, just like the Mesopotamian ziggurats, designed to reach the heavens, ziggurats were meant to be the bridge to bridge the gap between humans and gods. Locating in Mesopotamia, Babel is often linked to Babylon, a major center of ziggurat construction. Let's keep going. The ziggurat of Babylon, Entemenanki, right? Entemenanki, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth. That's what it's called. That's what Entemenaki means. A massive ziggurat in Babylon dedicated to Marduk, the chief god of Babylon, estimated to be 300 feet tall, making it one of the tallest structures of its times. Interesting, right? Some historians believe that this could have been the inspiration for the biblical Tower of Babel. Historic mentions, Herodotus mentioned this, described a massive temple tower in Babylon. This is in the 5th century BC, 500 BC. Barosius, a Babylonian priest, wrote that a great tower was destroyed by the gods. And then archaeological evidence confirms that ziggurats were real structures built to symbolize divine connection. Why is this important? Because if a flood happened, and that's important, and that happened in the Bible, and that show, and there's history and archaeology and scientific evidence to prove that that was here. How much more, the Tower of Babel being another thing that people can consider as true. Let's keep going. The Tower of Babel and language and language confusion, right? Genesis 11:7 says, "Let us confuse their language so they will not understand each other." The Bible describes God confusing human language, leading to scattering of nations. Some scholars compare this to a real historical language divergence in Mesopotamia. In Sumerian mythology, a text, Enmerkar and the Lord of Arata, described a time when all people spoke one language before gods caused confusion. This is in Sumerian mythology. And if you know anything about Sumeria, Sumeria is the oldest known civilization we have today. Sumeria is the oldest known civilization. It's older than Babylon. It's older than Egypt. It's older than Assyria. It's older than Persia. It's older than the Israelites. It's the oldest civilization we know of today. The first civilization we know of today, right? But it says all people spoke one language before the gods caused confusion. Did the Tower of Babel represent human unity? In both the Bible and Mesopotamian texts, a great structure is linked to human ambition and divine intervention. The collapse of Babel reflects the reality of Mesopotamian city-states, which were often divided by language and political rivalries. Why is that important? Because we believe that languages, that the confusion of these nations caused a diversity of language. Just like these city-states. These city-states in Babylon were known to be separated by people with differing languages and political rivalries. Let's keep going. Scientific evidence. This is where we get into proof that all these, that these played a major role in the, that certain events that happen in real history, or the way things are, could have been caused by a flood. All right, marine fossils high above sea level. Right, it says it is beyond dispute among geologists that on every continent we find fossils of sea creatures in rock layers which today are high above sea level. For example, we find marine fossils. These are like fish or certain aquatic animals. We find marine fossils in most of the rock layers in the Grand Canyon, right? These includes the topmost layer in the sequence, the Kabab limestone, exposed at the rim of the canyon, which today is approximately 7,000 to 8,000 feet above sea level. You know how high that is? That is higher than most mountains, right? Or not most mountains, but plenty of mountains. It's very high. It's very, very high up, right? Though at the top of the sequence, this limestone must have been deposited beneath ocean waters loaded with lime sediment that swept over northern Arizona and beyond. Other rock layers exposed in Grand Canyon also contain large numbers of marine fossils. The best example is the Red Wall limestone, which commonly contains fossil brachiopods, a clam-like organism, corals, bryozoans, lace corals, crinoids, sea lilies, bivalves, types of clams, gastropods, marine snails, trilobites and cephalopods, and even fish teeth, right? So these marine fossils are found haphazardly. If I'm reading that right, that might have been a typo. Preserved in the limestone bed. The crinoids, for example, are found with their columels, discs totally separated from one another, while in life they are stacked on top of one another to make up their stems. Thus, these marine creatures were catastrophically destroyed and buried in the lime sediment. So the way that they're fossilized show that they must have been forced there. You see what I'm saying? It shows that it must have been a catastrophic pressure that buried them, damn near alive. But let's keep going. The Himalayas. Marine fossils are also found high in the Himalayas, the world's tallest mountain range, reaching up to 29,000 feet above sea level. Even that high, you find aquatic life forms, or that once had life, right? Fossils. For example, fossil ammonites, coiled marine cephalopods, are found in limestone beds in the Himalayas of Nepal. All geologists agree that ocean waters must have buried these marine fossils in these limestone beds, right? So how did these marine limestone beds get high up in the Himalayas? The explanation: there's only one possible explanation for this phenomenon. The ocean waters at some time in the past flooded over the continents. Could the continents have then sunk below today's sea level so that the Earth's waters flooded over them? No. The continents are made up of lighter rocks that are less dense than the rocks in the ocean floor and rocks in the mantle beneath the continents. The continents, in fact, have an automatic tendency to rise and thus float on the mantle rocks beneath, well above the ocean floor rocks. This explains why the continents today have such high elevations compared to the deep ocean floor, and why the ocean basins can hold so much water. Okay, fossil graveyards. Fossil graveyards found in rock layers around the world are evidence of the global flood. If the Genesis flood is described in Genesis 7 and 8 really occurred, what evidence would we expect to find? The first article in this series overviewed the 6 main geological evidences that testified to the Genesis flood, while the second article discussed evidence number one, see the list below. Now let's take a closer look at evidence number 2, right? So it says, after noting in Genesis 7 that all the high hills and the high mountains were covered by water, and all air-breathing life in the land was swept away and perished, it should be obvious what evidence we would expect to find. So simply spoken, if the Bible tells you that everything, even everything under anything as high as a mountain, was covered with the earth, and that all life forms were swept away, right? All land life forms were swept away. It's saying that it would be obvious. There should be obvious evidence that we should find that should support that, right? Wouldn't we expect to find rock layers all over the earth filled with billions of dead animals and plants that were buried rapidly and fossilized in sand, mud, and lime? Of course, and that's exactly what we find. Furthermore, even though the catastrophic geologic activity of the flood would have waned in the immediate post-flood period, ongoing mini catastrophes would still have produced localized fossil deposits. Graveyards around the world. Countless billions of plant and animal fossils are found in extensive graveyards where they have to be buried rapidly in a massive scale. Often the fine details of the creatures are exquisitely preserved, right? So there are creatures that we see that are just like perfectly fossilized and preserved, right? For example, billions of straight-shelled chambered nautiloids in Figure 2, that's this, are fossilized with other marine creatures in a 7-foot thick layer with the red wall limestone of the Grand Canyon. It's figure 1. Sorry, it's difficult to see. I can only make the picture so big. Figure 1. This fossil graveyard stretches for 180 miles across northern Arizona and southern Nevada, covering an area of at least 10,500 miles. These squid-like fossils are all different sizes, from small young nautiloids to their bigger, older relatives. Graveyards around the world. Continue. To form, To form such a vast fossil graveyard required 24 cubic miles of lime and sand, silt flowing in a thick soup-like slurry at more than 16 feet per second, more than 11 miles per hour, to catastrophically overwhelm and burn this huge living population of nautiloids, right? Let's see. Hundreds of thousands of marine creatures were buried with amphibians, spiders, scorpions, millipedes, insects, and reptiles in a fossil graveyard at, again, pardon my mispronunciation, Montaigu-les-Mines, France. More than 100,000 fossil specimens representing more than 400 species have been recovered from a shale layer associated with coal beds and in the Mazon Creek area near Chicago. This spectacular fossil graveyard includes ferns, insects, scorpions, and tetrapods buried with jellyfish, mollusks, crustaceans, and fish, often with soft parts exquisitely preserved. At Florissant, or Colorado, a wide variety of insects, freshwater mollusks, fish, birds, and several hundred plant species, including nuts and blossoms, are buried together. Bees and birds have to be buried rapidly in order to be so well preserved. Alligator fish, including sunfish, deep sea bass, chubs, pursereal, herring, and garpite, 3 to 7 feet long. Birds, turtles, mammals, mollusks, crustaceans, many varieties of insects and palm leaves were buried together in the vast green river formation of Wyoming. Graveyards around the world. Let's keep going. Notice in many of these examples how marine and land-dwelling creatures are found buried together. That's the part to really put together. Why is there land animals and sea animals buried together and well preserved? Something to consider. How could this have happened unless the ocean waters rose and swept over the continents in a global catastrophic flood? At Fossil Bluff, in the north coast of Australia's island state of Tasmania, figure 3, that is this right here in Tasmania, Fossil Bluff of Tasmania. So like I lost my spot. Of Tasmania, many thousands of marine creatures, corals and bryozoans, lace corals, bivalves, clams, gastropods, snails, were buried together in a broken state, along with a toothed whale. That's the figure 4. It's this right here. And a marsupial possum. Figure 5. That is. Again, if it may not be up here, I'm thinking this is not, can't be figure 5. This is figure 5 right here. All right. Whales and possums don't live together. So only a watery catastrophe would have buried them together. In order for such large ammonites, figure 8, and other marine creatures to be buried in the chalk beds of Britain, figure 6, many children of microscopic marine creatures had to bury them catastrophically. These same beds also stretch right across Europe to the Middle East as well as into the Midwest of the USA, forming a global scale fossil graveyard, meaning it goes from the Middle East throughout Europe and even to the Midwest of the USA, forming a global scale fossil graveyard. In addition, more than 7 trillion tons of vegetation are buried in the world's coal beds found across every continent, including Antarctica. Wow. Even in Antarctica. Let's keep going. Exquisite preservation. Such was the speed at which many creatures were buried and fossilized under catastrophic flood conditions that they were exquisitely preserved. Many fish were buried so rapidly, virtually alive, that even fine details of fins, eye sockets, and have been preserved. That's in figure 9. This right here, if I'm not mistaken. It says in figure 9, some fish are buried so rapidly that the fine details of fins and eye sockets have been preserved, right? Many trilobites, figure 10, have been so exquisitely preserved that even the compound lens systems in their eyes are still available for detailed study. See? Right there. Let's keep going. The Mawsonites in Sprigge, when discovered, was identified as a fossilized jellyfish. This is in figure 11. It was found in a sandstone bed that covers more than 400 square miles of outback South Australia. Millions of such soft-bodied marine creatures are exquisitely preserved in this sandstone bed. Consider what happened to soft-bodied creatures like jellyfish when washed up on a beautiful beach today. Because they consist only of soft jelly, they melt in the sun and are also destroyed by waves crashing onto the beach. Based on this reality, the discoverer of these exquisitely preserved soft-bodied marine creatures concluded that all of them had to be buried in less than a day, right? So as you can see by these even how a jellyfish would be preserved, that something catastrophic had to happen to even preserve jellyfish, because that doesn't make sense. A jellyfish will come up on shore and it'll melt while on shore. You see what I'm saying? Like it's nothing stopping it from just completely, evaporating because it's made of soft jelly. Let's keep going. Exquisite preservation. Some fish were buried alive and fossilized so quickly in the geologic record that they were caught in the act of eating their last meal. See figure 12 right here. A fish is eating another fish and it's massively buried, right? Then there is the classic example of a female marine reptile, an ichthyosaur, about 6 feet long, found fossilized at the moment of giving birth to her baby. Figure 13. 1 minute this huge creature was giving birth, then seconds later, without time to escape, mother and baby were buried and snapped frozen in a catastrophic avalanche of lime mud. Transcontinental rock layers. Transcontinental rock layers. On every continent are found layers of sedimentary rocks over vast areas. Many of these sediment layers can be traced all the way across the continents, and even between continents. Furthermore, when geologists look closely at these rocks, they find evidence that the sediments were deposited rapidly. Consider the sedimentary rock layers exposed in the walls of the Grand Canyon in northern Arizona. Figure 2 over here, right? The sequence of layers is not unique to the region of the USA. For more than 50 years, geologists have recognized that the strata belong to 6 megasequences, very thick, distinctive sequences of sedimentary rock layers that can be traced right across North America, right? Let's keep going. Transcontinental rock layers. The lowermost sedimentary layers in Grand Canyon are the Tapeats sandstone, belonging to the Salk mega sequence. Its equivalents. Those layers comprised of the same materials cover much of the USA. Figure 3. We can hardly imagine that forces were necessary to deposit such a vast continent, wide series of deposits. Yet, at the base of this sequence are huge boulders, figure 4, and sand beds deposited by storms, figure 5. Both are evidence that massive forces deposited these sediment layers rapidly and violently right across the entire USA. Slow and gradual, present-day uniformitarian processes cannot account for this evidence, but the global catastrophic Genesis flood surely can. Another layer in the Grand Canyon is the lower Carboniferous Mississippi Redwall limestone. This belongs to the Kaskaskia mega sequence of North America. So the same limestones appear in many places across North America, as far as Tennessee and Pennsylvania. These limestones also appear in the exact position in the strata sequence, and they have the exact same fossils and other features in them. Unfortunately, these limestones have been given different names in other locations because the geologists saw only what they were working on locally and didn't realize that other geologists were studying essentially the same limestone beds in other places. Even more remarkable, the same Carboniferous limestone beds also appear thousands of miles east in England, containing the same fossils and other features. Shalom. That's it for the video, everybody. Lord willing, this edifying video through the Spirit. I would like to give all honor and glory to the Most High God Yahweh, Ba'ashim Mashiach Malak Yahushai. Lord willing, this edifying video through the Spirit. Lord willing, you can get something from it. The video consisted of multiple accounts of a global flood, the importance of mythology in the ancient world and how that was the preservation of history and great events, the proof of multiple different civilizations speaking on one specific event doesn't discredit the Bible, but it further proves that the Bible is a real book and that these events actually happened, right? Then you have other accounts such as the Tower of Babel being also evident around the same time that people are documenting that there was an ancient flood, right? By the same civilizations that are completely unbiased to that of the those that lived in the southern Levant, like the Israelites, right? You also have, scientific and geological accounts, geographical accounts, sorry, of these of proof that there had to be a global flood to explain certain evidence in the earth, right? Like mass graveyards or mass in extremely fine fossilized animal fossils, or aquatic fossils in higher mountains, something that's 27,000 to 28,000 feet above sea level. How does that happen? You see what I'm saying? But that would be shown by the evidence found in the global flood. Lord willing, this edifying video through the Spirit. I'd like to give all honor and glory to the Most High God Yahweh, Ba'ashim Mashiach Malak Yahushai. Again, I'd like to bid everybody strong shalom, Kwame Shalala, shalom.